Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast, episode 51. In this episode, I speak with Debbie Reeves. Debbie's an author, a speaker, a podcaster, an amazing creative, and she's also an amazing physical therapist, and she's also my amazing physical therapist. That's how we met. Debbie came to me at a time during my leg injury where I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and as soon as she started working with me, it was like a weight had lifted. And I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was going in a good direction with her. And she's taken me to a place of healing and recovery that I didn't even know I could get to. So I have nothing but the deepest gratitude for Debbie. And we always talk about and connected early on about books and spirituality and our projects we were doing. So it was a real treat to be able to sit down as we've been talking about doing this podcast for a long time. And you should check out her podcast, which is the Holy Shift podcast, which is an amazing podcast. And the book of the episode is The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. I picked this one for Debbie because I at least took from this book, it was a lot about serendipity, meeting the right connections and people at the right time, the universe and God giving you messages at the right time. And Debbie's definitely been one of those people for me. The Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. And if you listen to podcasts, be sure to follow this podcast, the Sam Dever Podcast, on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to watch it, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@ the Sam Dever Podcast. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Debbie. Debbie Reeves, welcome to the Sam Dever Podcast.
Thank you. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here. It really is.
This is amazing. This is a gift. I will just say, this is a gift to be able to do what we're doing right now to the level we're doing it. I just feel blessed. I mean, there's no other word to describe it.
Yeah.
You know.
It is. It's a manifestation coming to life right now. Yeah.
And like with you, it's like, where do we begin?
I know. Well, probably at the beginning.
We should probably start at the beginning. But again, I'm just so grateful to be able, first of all, to have met you and to have you in my life, but then to have gotten to this moment. You've been such a great help to me in so many different ways, which we'll get into. But thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for helping make this happen.
Yeah, well, thank you for being you and being open to allowing, the deeper part of therapy to take place.
Yeah. Which we're going to get into here in a second. I want to obviously talk about how we connected, but before we do, I think maybe it might be best just to go into who are you? What's your background?
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the whole biography.
Yeah. Okay.
But I know you, but for people that don't know you,
well,
tell us a little bit about yourself.
Debbie Reeves. I'm a physical therapist. I've been doing that for about 30 years. I specialize in sports medicine, orthopedics, and along my career, I have worked with, the Lakers, the Dodgers, the LA Kings, among other people. And now I'm working here in Burbank, and I have been doing physical therapy for 3 decades, like I said, but when you learn how to do something in it, I'm one who continues to try to be curious and learn more and widen the breadth and deepen the depth of what I'm doing. And so as the physical therapy and that part of it started to get more automatic, I started to explore a little deeper. And my personal mission is to help every person that walks through that door that I interact with feel better walking out. And I am very good at helping people physically feel better, but then I also have, as my own spiritual journey has been developing and growing, I've been seeing how the body responds to the spirit within. And while I'm working on people, they get relaxed. I gain their trust. They begin to open up. And it is therapy in addition to physical therapy. And that was also, I think, what sets me apart is I follow the spirit within, and every day I ask to be used for just not only helping people heal physically, but also spiritually, emotionally, and all of that. So, yeah. So when COVID hit, things changed drastically in the physical therapy world. And I was working for about 19 years in the Valencia office of our practice. And then, staff, we just greatly diminished in our caseload and things. And so we were just doing a lot of shifting around. So during that time, I went to the Palmdale office for a while. I went to the San Fernando office for a while. And then I ended up in Burbank in February of, I believe it was 2021. And soon thereafter, that's when we met.
And that's the perfect segue into, I can totally attest to going through what you've experienced. Like it really, and for just physical therapy, even before I get into my injury, like I never really thought about it because I never really had to do it. But then when you're injured and you have to do it, you're like, oh man, how am I getting out of this injury? Like it's really hard in a lot of injuries, I think, to see the light at the end of the tunnel, especially in those initial phases. And just to have seen the process work, it really is incredible. It's really an incredible practice.
Yeah. And I love that, sometimes I think, oh my gosh, I've been doing this 30 years, but I love being able to give people hope and to give people a realistic idea of what's possible. And because I've seen miracles happen, I've seen people commit to healing and doing the work that it takes. And so I can help give people pictures or connect people with others who have experienced the same thing before. And so and kind of mentor, set up mentors with people that, might need that extra boost of confidence, encouragement, or just a vision of what is possible in their current situation.
And was there something in particular that drew you to wanting to become a physical therapist?
Well,
was there like that divine moment of like, oh, this is what I'm going to do? And how did that all?
It was actually kind of a practical thing. My undergraduate degree is in kinesiology and exercise science. And like I mentioned, at the time I was working for Sentinella Hospital's Fitness Institute, and we did all the preseason physicals for the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Kings. And I soon became a supervisor there and kind of worked my way up rather quickly and realized, okay, I can't really do much more here unless I got further education. And also when different athletes would come up and say, I had a microdiscectomy and a fusion in my back, or I had a rotator cuff and a, slap tear. I was like, okay, what is that? And what do I need to do to make sure I don't hurt them? But also, how do I help them? And so then I realized I needed to go back to school and become a physical therapist. So it was more like a practical step in the next direction. And, but yeah, it's definitely served me well. In terms of being able to help people. Yeah.
Me being one of those people, going back to when you came to this facility in Burbank in February, because, I had gotten here end of December before then, 2 years ago. And, things were getting slightly better, but I was so in the dark with so much of my injury. And then all of a sudden in February, there was a new therapist there, and you came over, and I remember instantly feeling your presence. Like I felt like just like this, everything's going to be okay. Like I felt like for the first time, I'm like, oh, I don't know what's about to happen, but things are fine. And you just really taking the time and going the extra mile and the extra effort to really dive into my injury, try to figure out what's going on, being there leading up to when I found my surgeon that helped with a major nerve surgery I had, and just being there through every step of the way for that. And what I've tried to tell a few people, it's like, I go to physical therapy with Debbie, but she's also my spiritual therapist, my crisis manager. Yeah. Because when we started, for those listening or watching, like our relationship really took off in terms of just this intellectual experience, because I can't remember if I said it or you said, but you're like, oh, what are you doing this weekend? I'm like, oh, I just got some books that came in, and going to read those. Like, oh, what type of books are you reading? I'm like, I believe it was like the Bhagavad Gita and like some other spiritual books. You're like, oh, spiritual books. Like, oh, well, I write spiritual things and all this. And then it was like, oh, you do? Like,
Yeah.
tell me about this. Enlightenment, huh?
Yeah.
So from there, I felt like I was excited to come to therapy because I knew we were going to talk about a lot of spiritual things. And in a way, it took my mind off my injury, if that makes sense. But it was healing and you were working on it the entire time, but it was almost like effortless when I'd come in because we'd just be talking and you'd just be working on me. And, and to me, my mind's going a million miles a minute talking about all this stuff while you're working. And by the way, did you ever think of this? And then next thing you know, like, all right, we're done. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you came here for my leg.
Yeah.
I guess that's why. Now I got to do my exercises. Oh,
it's the whip.
Dang it. But I really feel like you were talking about like connecting that, just the mind, body, and soul. And your injury is more than just a physical healing. It actually, you heal from within, and energy is real, and the subconscious mind is real. I even remember you showing me videos of nerves because at the time, I had a nerve surgery and we were waiting for those nerves to reconnect, and you were showing videos of, look, this is what it looks like. So putting that in my mind. So just being a constant inspiration to me.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I do pick up on things that people need. And like I said, I just try to be open, and certain things either come out in a certain frame of reference that makes sense to who I'm working with. But in your case, I was like, okay, you had this injury, and I'm like, well, there's more to this here. And I didn't read anything in your evaluation of what was going on there. And as we were talking, I knew you were on a spiritual quest, that something was happening. Something was causing you to go deeper, and something was therefore going to be born from that. And it's been such a beautiful journey to see how, as you've gotten dialed in to your deeper self, whatever you want to call that, to see all the pieces come together in your favor. Like the timing of when we realized, okay, this isn't just an ACL injury. You have a nerve palsy here, and what's being done about that? And you're like, I don't know, nothing's being done about that. And so then you started to investigate that, and the timing of, and finding Dr. Surya, who is, just amazing and phenomenal, and within your insurance network, and the timing of that, because nerve regeneration has a certain limited window, and you were right in the sweet spot of finding him and having, that nerve transposition. And so also what I deal with a lot of is people come in here and they have fear, they have pain, they also have a loss of sense of self, because sometimes injuries are life-altering, like in your case. And suddenly people can't do all that they want to do in life, but also sometimes it's their job that they lose, and therefore it's also a loss of their identity, because a lot of people, place their identity and their self-worth in what they do or what they have or what they can do. And so my hope is that I can help people realize that they are more than what they do have accumulated in life, what they look like or anything like that, and that they are whole just as they are. And, then I also try to pick up on if they do have fear or what is going on in their mind that is constantly kind of limiting and restricting the power of healing that we have available to us, because like you referenced, I do see things as energetic, from an energetic standpoint, and that there is only a stream of well-being. There is an abundance of love, and everything is working out in our favor. And it's kind of up to us to allow it. We can either allow it or we can resist it. And so an extension of my job is helping to kind of help people open up and acknowledge and be in tune with what are they afraid of, and then trying to shift it in a different direction. So.
When you got me thinking, the timing of my injury, if it would have happened even 5 years ago, I was going to say 10 years, but even 5 years ago, I don't think I think I was mentally ready. I mean, I didn't want it to happen, but if it was going to happen, at least I was in the state of mind I was in when it happened, because I was open to all these other, I don't know what the word would be, perspectives, I guess, maybe, of what this is doing. Because a lot of people, I mean, they would just look at me like, oh my gosh, like, what are you going to do? Like, you're not going to be able to do this. You can't do that. And at the time, I viewed it like, well, I have a chance to read 50 books in 1 year right now and really dive. I had someone tell me, he's actually coming on the podcast soon. He said, like, I've always wanted not that I'm glad that you're hurt, but I've always wanted the opportunity to sit and read like 50 books in a year and just do nothing and just do that. And I had that opportunity. And coming in and working with you and having these conversations, it really took the load off of the physical. Yeah, I mean, I recognized and could feel like, okay, but it's like, I also was of the mindset and open to the messages you were giving me. It's like you and I talk about, like, God's communicating messages through people all the time. You just have to be paying attention and open to the messages you're receiving. And just the things you were telling me, it's like, okay, yeah, my legs hurt. Yeah, I'll get to that later. Like, well, it'll eventually, whatever. It's like, tell me more about enlightenment.
Yeah.
Tell me more about, we'll get to this, more about the books you're writing and all this other stuff. Because this is, it gave me an opportunity to detach from the body and the material world in a way where I got to focus on, like, hey, there's this whole other plane. Like, there's this whole other energy. And I told Eric on the last podcast, it's not like I don't miss being hurt, but I do miss the simplicity of those times. It was the COVID shutdown. I laid in bed most of the day and we would just talk philosophy and books and all this. But now that I'm better, which is godsend, but I get back into the chaos of life and back to getting frustrated over little things where a year and a half ago, I'm like, oh, that means that's nothing. Yeah. So I find myself pulling myself back to remind myself of those times early on with you and I having those talks and those discussions and kind of just taking that time to breathe and like, all right, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And I actually listened to one of your podcasts on the way here about the inner GPS.
Yeah.
And that was a huge thing you told me about. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we all have our own inner guide, our own inner guidance system. And it's constantly giving us signals. And whether you look at, like, from the beginning of time, the Big Bang Theory, there was energy before there was physical matter. And biblically, if you look at, Jeremiah 1:5 says, I knew you before you were in your mother's womb. So before there was flesh and bone and, blood and, the skin that we see, there was this energetic spirit being constantly guiding us to all that we are meant to experience, and to the divine purpose and plan of, the higher power, whatever you call that, God or source or anything. Our physical being and our physical presence is meant to expand that divine energy within us. And so we are constantly being guided. Our body responds to the spirit within. Our body and mind respond to it, but our mind does have a mind of its own and tends to see things from a limited perspective. So how I describe it is, before we had cell phones or anything like that, I traveled back and forth across the country a couple times, and it was before we had GPS. And I used the little accordion maps, the paper maps that you pull out, and I had to map my own route. And I as we were going down the highway, I had to pay attention to, the on-ramps and the off-ramps and what's coming. And I didn't have access to see, okay, there's a Chipotle at exit 63, so that's what I think of as our mind's perspective. It's kind of seeing just a piece of the puzzle. It's not seeing everything, and it does tend to be a little bit of lack in mindset and perspective. So, if you want to put together a podcast, then the mind might say, oh, you don't have time to do that. You don't have enough money. You don't have the equipment. Who wants to listen to you? And so when we hear that stuff, our body feels that isn't in alignment with what our greater GPS knows to be true and possible. And what our inner GPS is more of like the satellite perspective. You know, now we have GPS on our phone and in our car and everywhere else. And we have this intricate navigation system that is collecting the information from the satellites, 4 to 7 satellites from out in the atmosphere. And so imagine, our mind's perspective of driving along the highway and seeing only the windshield view versus the GPS perspective of our inner guide and that eternal, infinite source of provision and love that we have available to us. And so when those things don't match, when our mind is telling us, you can't do this, there's not enough money, there's not enough time, you're too old to get that started and lifted off the ground, we feel it in our body. Because our body, every cell in our body responds to this divine energy. And so we can use how our body feels to direct us if we're on the right path or not, or if our thoughts are in alignment with our greater sense of self and our purpose, and or if we're in a situation that doesn't line up with our best path. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. Yeah. And I don't know if you said it on the podcast or one of our conversations about the inner GPS. You feel it. Like you can feel it, because there's been times where on paper everything should be great, but it doesn't feel great. Like, why don't I feel great? It's because I'm not aligned with my truth. I'm not aligned with following. I've had someone call it being value congruent, like being in line with your values. And at least for me, it's hard. Like, it's difficult because I think there's just so much distraction and chaos in the world anyway. And just with social media and with everything, like your mind just gets filled with so many things. You don't know what's what.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, that's why I'm so big on the book, Anthony DeMello's Awareness, that I've discussed several times with you. It's because I really feel self-awareness is the key to a lot of things. But I think a lot of people don't even know who they are. And they don't even know to even search for who they are. We're just all on autopilot. So like the whole inner GPS, it makes sense. And when you know what, when you start going the right way, it feels right.
Yeah.
Even doing what we're doing right now, it feels right.
Yeah, for sure. And I hearing you talk about that, it reminded me of a few months ago when you were in a work situation where you came in and you were like, oh my gosh, so much is going on. And you told me that they were laying off people in your work, and that, you were given your notice. And I was like, I'm so excited for you, which is totally not the typical response.
Yeah.
But I knew that, okay, this is opening a door for other things. And in that time period, there were some beautiful things that happened that, are moving you further along in your purpose. If you were working, I don't know if you would have given yourself the time off to do those projects, or you weren't even home to meet certain people that were instrumental in, propelling you forward in this podcast. And so, and then when things came back around and you were offered something even greater, it's, yeah. And there are times even recently, so that's a big situation, but as I've been practicing this and learning about this for probably 25, 30 years, but I've really been deliberate in my practice for about 12 years. And so now even on little things, I know what's going to happen. And one example is I was off work one day. I was supposed to have a doctor's appointment, and that ended up being canceled. So I sat there for a moment. I thought, okay, what's the right thing to do? And I thought, okay, I can still call them and tell them that, be honest, and tell them that I could come into work this afternoon. But how I felt was I knew I was going to be off that afternoon. But I called anyway, and I told my boss, I said, okay, my doctor's appointment got canceled, and so I am available to come in this afternoon. And he said, oh, that would be great. We really need you, blah, blah, blah. And I got off the phone. I thought, that's not what my GPS is telling me. I know I'm going to be off this afternoon. But I thought, okay, well, I guess I better, go jump in the shower. And as I walked into the shower, I heard my phone go. And I went and I checked the message, and my boss said, "Oh, never mind. We had a couple cancellations. You can just take the afternoon off." And I was like, okay, that's what feels right. So you really can follow how you feel and trust it. And another part of that trust is a lot of times we don't believe that we should feel good all the time. We think that if we want something, that we have to struggle for it, we have to work, we have to sacrifice. And, I just have to preface this by saying, I don't know of anybody that works harder than I do. I mean, I might know a couple people, but I get up at 5 a.m., even on my days off, and I'm writing, and I'm, working here 40 to, sometimes 50 hours a week. And, I take care of my mom who's 90 years old, and, I have kids in college and graduating and starting life. And I'm, writing a book. Actually, I have 9 that are outlined and ready to go. But, and then I'm starting a podcast. And so, yeah, dust does not settle under my feet. But there is an ease to those things, because when you're in alignment with your purpose, it's like getting up at 5 a.m. and writing 7 pages. There is an ease when you're in that flow. And so there's still work that needs to be done, but it's not a struggle when you are in alignment with what you're meant to do. Does that make sense?
Makes complete sense.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of people have gotten the impression that, we have to struggle and we have to work hard. And then that's when we stop listening to our GPS and we start listening more to our head of what should I do and what do I need to do to succeed? And we start to compare, oh, well, they're 30 and they have a house already and I don't yet. And all of those kind of things that aren't your GPS talking to you. So
everyone has a different path, different timing.
Yeah.
So how would you suggest someone find the GPS?
Yeah.
It's one thing to know about it.
Yeah.
But in terms of is it journaling, meditation?
Yeah.
Guess different things will work for everyone. What's been your experience on how you best
Those are
tune
all really good. There's many paths and there's many different things that you can do to kind of get dialed in. My path started when I was 18, and I was I was on a vacation with my friend, and she was, how when you're in your teen years and you get chubby and then you get taller and you lean out and you get chubby again, and it's just, your weight's constantly fluctuating because of hormones and all those other things. But her weight was always ideal. And I said, how is it that you always seem to have your ideal weight? And she says, your body's going to tell you what it needs. And so from that point on, I started to listen to, okay, what is my body telling me in relation to food? But then as I started to live life, then I really started to listen to it in other areas. And what it is you just take a moment. You have to quiet the noise. You have to quiet. Meditation is really good for that. Just taking some deep breaths. And if you're thinking of, if there's a narrative going on, you can quiet those thoughts. And just, I like to listen to an air conditioner or something, or, the airplane's taking off, because there's no emotional attachment to that. And then you kind of feel how your body feels. And for me, I can tell when I'm too much in my mind, because it's just a tension all in here. There's tightness. And then, if you breathe and then you let it go, you can just feel the release in your lungs, and you can feel kind of the blood flow a little bit, and just the letting go of that tension. And so that's one way that I feel when I'm in alignment. The other way is you can do a body sway test, because, like I said, every cell in your body responds to the spirit within. And you can ask yourself some true false questions and say, I once was working with a football player, and he was on a break and going back to school, and he was considering changing majors, and he was kind of nervous about telling his parents about it. And but he didn't know which major he wanted to dial into. And I said, okay, stand up. And we were in the clinic. It was busy. And here's this big football player. And I said, okay, feel how your body feels. Right now you're standing solidly, evenly distributed weight on your feet. And I said, tell yourself, I am a girl. And he's like, I am a girl. And he leaned back when he said it. It was subtle, but I noticed it. And then I said, okay, now tell yourself, I am in third grade. And he's like, I am in third grade. And he kind of leaned back. And then I said, now say your name. Say, I am. And I'm not going to tell his name, but he said his name and he was solid. And I said, okay, so when you're quiet, when you're at your house later on and by yourself, just say, whatever the two majors are. And whichever one you're more solid in when you say, that's the one that's meant for you. So that's kind of a good practically applied thing. If people aren't really dialed into tension in their body or anything like that, you can do that. And I even did that with my kids. My daughter was like, oh, what should I wear to the party? And, she's like, is it the yellow one or the green one? And then I'm like, okay, go try on one and come back out and then try on the other one. And, you could tell by how she felt. I'm like, well, which one do you feel all that in? And she was like, okay, the yellow one. I'm like, well, that's the one you need to wear. So, so you can try all these different things. And even on, my kids watch like The Bachelorette and stuff. And I would walk in to the room during one of the final episodes when it's down to the last two, and how they do the pre-camera roll of and interview the people that are in contention. And I could always tell who was going to lose. And they were like, did you see the Instagram reveal? Did you see that? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I can just tell by what they're saying and their body language. And they're like, Mom. So there's it's just taking a little time and noticing how your body is responding to what you say and what you think and how you feel.
Multiple thoughts. Well, first of all, that was my choice of wearing this turtleneck. I'm like, do I go with this or the navy? I'm like, no, this one feels right. Thank you for wearing a turtleneck.
I know.
You didn't have to, but
I know. Well, you've been telling me so much about your turtleneck.
Showed much respect to the podcast. But it's almost like, I don't know if this analogy fits, but it's almost like when you go to the optometrist and they're like, how about this one? No.
Yes.
How about this one? It's still blurry, but all of a sudden, oh, I can see perfectly clear. That's it.
Yes.
That's your prescription. That's kind of what it reminds me of.
Yes. Yeah.
When you're talking about it. That's really I've never really thought of it like that. Just saying different things. You have all these things in your head. Well, actually write them all out and then say them and which ones feel it. I know you've kind of done that with me a few times. Mm-hmm. Like you'll ask me, how does it feel?
Well, when you were looking for jobs,
I
was like, well, how does that one feel? Which one feels better? And because the message that I feel for you is learn to trust you more. You've spent time learning about other people that are, philosophical, spiritual, highly enlightened and things. And now it's your time.
I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I am butchering this quote. I'm paraphrasing big time, but he said something along the lines like, it's okay to admire certain people that's come before you's work and everything, but I mean, Einstein, whoever it was, they all breathe the same air you breathe. They all, that was there, like you have just as much as a human experience as they do. Mm-hmm. So don't make it your human experience. And like you said, you got to trust yourself. Like you know more than you think you do.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
And that's how you create the greatest impact in the world. Right now I hear a lot of people talking about, I want to make my impact and all that. And again, coming from my scientific, background, I see each individual as a part of the body of humanity and contributing to the world. And, some people, every part is important. Not everybody can be an eyeball or be a finger or, be a pancreas or whatever, but we all work together to actually create life and to keep it going. And so each person being who they are meant to become is vital, is important, and really helps, the body of life continue. And it's a challenge though, because we don't see how everything is working or putting together. But I think if we all value who we are created to be and value how we feel, our purpose, and, make that our daily practice of just being content with this moment and living it and enjoying it to the fullest, and knowing that that's how you are going to best serve the world. I think a lot of worry would fall away. I think a lot of comparison. I think a lot of insecurity and, just the negative stuff that goes on out there would fall away if we all realize that.
Well, contributing to this big thing that's way bigger than us.
Yeah.
And we just have to play our role.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just have to be and follow what feels good and follow what feels right. And, acknowledge and give gratitude for every moment.
And this is something I'm finding lately too. I mean, when it feels right, that doesn't mean everyone else is going to think it feels right.
Yeah.
Like you might have other people like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's one of the biggest battles. And I quote this all the time, but I had an acting teacher, shout out to Chris Leby. He said, sometimes the people closest to you will be your biggest deterrents.
Yeah.
He was talking in a creative sense, but your friends or your family may say, like, what are you doing? Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
Like, well, no, it feels right. I'm living my truth. They're like, no, you go be a lawyer, go be a doctor. It's like, they're thinking, it's like they want the best for you. But a lot of times what people want the best for you is not really the best for you. Only you know what's going to be best for you. And that's something I've really been trying to tune in lately. It's like, only I can steer this ship.
That's true. That's true. And a lot of times those people closest to you, they get, I don't want to say caught up, but they get used to you playing a certain role. And I was talking with someone yesterday, actually, about being a parent. And a lot of times parents think of their kids as being little versions of themselves. And I know that I was blessed to, my kids look like me and stuff like that, but I know that they are their own unique individual. And my oldest daughter, she got accepted to 13 universities, and it got boiled down to 2. And she had to make a decision. And we went to the last 2 universities, and I felt like, okay, going to UC San Diego would have been just the greatest place. It was like 7-minute walk to the beach and all of this. But she told me, she's like, no, I need to go to University of Washington. And I was just like, that just did not feel right to me. But I was not going to stop her from being who she needed to be and, live her life. And now, 4.5 years later, I see she was with the right people, and that was exactly the right decision for her. And so sometimes those closest to us don't really see things that way. And they have their own experience, and it's coming from a point of love and their windshield perspective of what's possible. And recently I have gone through some changes and kind of shook up the ship a little bit in the lives of those closest to me. And the narrative I kept telling myself is, I'm going to go away for a little while. I'm going to get in tune with my deep self. And when I come back, you are going to be so pleased. It's going to be just the greatest thing to happen to you. It might not seem like it right now, but it's important. And I can serve more people by living my life on my own terms and following my path right now. But it's a challenge though, because
Can I ask you, where do you find that courage? 'Cause that takes courage to do that.
It does.
Especially when you do care about people too, it's like you do care about people's feelings. You do.
And you care about their approval.
Yeah.
And
even
pleasing them. Yeah, I know. It was just, there were actually moments when I was even with my own family where I was like, I could just feel it in my skin that I was not on the same wavelength. I just did not feel comfortable. And I don't know how to describe it. Maybe I will in a little bit later, a couple years from now or something.
Book number 10.
Yeah. But it was just something that I could not live that way anymore. And I knew that I felt like I was in a glass ceiling. I felt like I was confined and living. The way it feels is I was living underneath their expectations, and yet I saw a greater purpose and a greater way that I can serve if I no longer tried to please those people and live in that role. And it was hard. I mean, there were many times when I was like, okay, is this the right thing? And I felt guilty because I never want to hurt anybody or impose anything on anybody or make life more difficult for anybody, and especially my kids. And but I've heard, I just kept feeling reassurance, affirmation, you're going to be fine. I have morning time is my holy time when I listen to, just my deeper, I can hear that more clearly and things. And I just kept getting reassurances and revelations, as I was reading the Bible and talking about spiritual things. And there are signs of synchronicity and signs of confirmation that happen that you're on the right path. And so I just knew and know that I was doing the right thing. And I still am.
And it's amazing how when you do go get out of that comfort zone and start going toward that inner GPS, how everything starts unfolding in front of you.
Yeah. Everything.
It's like it's waiting for you. Like God, the universe, everyone's like, look, I'm trying to just go this way. I'm telling you, if you just go over here, go, and then you go, and I don't know if Alice in Wonderland, everything starts unveiling itself, and like, oh my gosh, why didn't I do this before? But it's so hard to take those first steps.
Yeah.
To get, I don't know, what is it? You can't see the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Type of thing sometimes.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like that old Indiana Jones movie where he's standing on that cliff and he can't see the next step.
Right.
You can't see it until you take it, and then it appears. And that's how I feel it is sometimes when you can't see the big picture. But I guess practicing following, how I feel and following my inner GPS for, decades now, I kind of trust that, okay, I just need to go in this direction and something's going to appear, and it always does.
I'm reminded of a quote from Anthony DeMello. He talks about so very few people are actually living. Most people are just keeping the body alive. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm thinking as we're talking. You think, well, what are my alternative? What are the options here? I can take this risk and follow this intuition, or I know the other path. I'm just going to keep feeling this way. Mm-hmm. and I think a lot of people just choose I'm just going to keep feeling this way for whatever reason, whatever the reason may be.
Yeah. I think that's their comfort zone.
And are afraid what other people are going to think or do, or maybe like just their own mind talks them out. Well, this is the safe bet here. Why would you take a risk over here? But
I know.
You are right about like the feeling alike. Because even relating back to the situation you're talking about, I was using work as an excuse, really, why I was feeling certain ways. And I realized that in retrospect. At the time, like, oh, this is sucking my soul and this is blah, blah, blah. But I realized I wasn't doing things I enjoyed doing outside of that. So that, when it got taken away and then something else came back, I had done the reframe. Mm-hmm. And I've been doing that a lot lately, and we'll get into that, because I know you have a lot to say on that. But reframing your perspective to like, oh no, this is actually a tool and a vehicle to fuel everything that I really enjoy doing. Mm-hmm. But you got to actually take the action and do the things you enjoy doing.
Yes. Yeah.
You have to actually do it.
Yes.
And once you start doing it, even though it is a lot of work, it's like, you're fine with it. you feel a lot, you just feel more energized and motivated and inspired. And
Yeah.
it's amazing how it can be a 180.
Yeah. And that is a shift because, right now, I know you're doing the same thing that you were doing 5 months ago, but you have a different perspective, because you've done that 180 and because you're no longer, just being run by the work. Now you're using the work to help you fulfill your purpose. And that's what I was saying yesterday was, when you are following your inner GPS, GPS is, for me, God's purpose system. And when you are following that, there is always the provision that you need. Always. Because why would God create that desire for you if there wasn't going to be the tools to get you there?
Oh, whoa.
It
just blew my mind right now. Yeah, no, you're right. Like, why would that even be there? If it's
why would that even be there?
It's there for a reason.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that's why you can trust. And these are the things that I can't really say in the office.
This is why we do the podcast.
Yes.
I wanted to record stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why, when there is worry or anything like that, I'm telling you, you don't have to worry about that. Because also, like worry doesn't serve, and that's, like the morning of your surgery or whenever that was, I can't remember.
The night before.
When I sent you those affirmations and things.
And I was reading through that text, and it was very simple. Like in my mind, I thought you had written like a 5-paragraph essay, but I went back and looked at it because I was in it was the most nervous I had probably ever, arguably one of the most, I can't say the most, but one of the most nervous I had ever been because it was a 5-hour surgery. There was no guarantees. I mean, anything can happen during surgery. Like things go wrong in surgeries all the time. And like to be under anesthesia for 5 hours, that's really what I was the most nervous about. And just, knowing that they were taking some nerve function from somewhere else and moving it somewhere else. I'm like, okay, is this going to go smooth? And blah, blah, blah. And you just simply, paraphrase, you basically you were wishing me well wishes and positive affirmations. And then I'm like, thank you so much. And then what you said in the next line, you're like, look, if you need to borrow some belief, you can have some from me. And I just remember in that moment, everything turned around. I'm like, wow, you're so positive right now. I'm believing so much more than I am going into this. It just fueled me. And I instantly wrote off affirmations about the surgery and I felt good about it and just went into it positive and it came out. And, like I said, Dr. Saria was like, yeah, that's one of the best ones I've ever done. Or that was the best one, up to that point, the best I've ever done. Everything went smooth, no complications, wait to go to therapy for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And you're good, we'll get going. And, but I'll never forget that. And I'll always be eternally grateful, not for everything you've done, but that moment in particular. That was a moment where it inspired me and inspires me now when I see people in a certain state. And when you're in that state, a lot of times you can't see it. Yeah. You can't, you're going, you can't see it, but sometimes that person comes along that can say the right thing that brings you back.
Yeah.
And makes you see.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah. And that's the power of, we have so much more power within us. And, I could tell you were in a state of worry or, concern. And so we have to be open to receiving that stream of well-being, that stream of healing and all of that. And, so I'm so glad that helped, but it was you receiving it and you receiving the belief and because I have, I know Tim and I talk about there are certain things that are inevitable. God is always working everything together for our good and things are always working out well. And we have the ability to heal, but we have to allow it and open it up. And being in a state of worry or fear kind of closes the channel of that. And so whatever I can do to, help you and help other people have belief and diminish the fear so that you can be open to allowing the best situation, the best circumstance possible to come to you. That's what I want. Yeah.
Well, and not to
So,
sidetrack us too much, but one thing I know I've talked to you about before, but I want to give people more perspective on. How many clients do you see a day when you come into a physical
me
therapy?
personally?
Yeah, on an average day, how many
like
people are you working with?
40. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So, and to give people perspective, you've never been through physical therapy or you've never been through an injury, like you're going through it. Not only physically, mentally, a bunch of stuff. And us both knowing and believing in energy.
Yeah.
I mean, you're coming into so many situations of really strong energy from people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's good, bad, or ugly.
Yeah.
And to be able to harness that and take, I mean, that just showed me your level of enlightenment, because most people, they're going to sink down to the level of the energy they're around, but it takes a super enlightened person to be able to work with that and to continue on. So to credit to you.
Oh,
and then I'm just thinking back in my mind, like, oh man, how many times have did I bring baggage into Debbie this week?
Yeah, no, but there are times when I you see me wear a jacket in here.
Is that why?
I kind of, if I can sense bad energy that I don't want to absorb, I put a jacket on and then I take it off when the person leaves. And I wash my hands extra or something. But no, I've never.
I just thought it was cold that day, Debbie.
I do get cold too.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, next time I'm wearing a jacket and you come, no, it's probably because I'm cold. Because I haven't felt that from you. But there are certain things you can do to protect your energy and stuff because you can tell when people are open to feeling better, when people are open to receiving that good energy. And you can tell when people just aren't. And so if I can sense that they're closed and they're not ready for it or whatever, then I do things to protect myself.
Well, and credit to you and everyone I've worked with in this environment, because, I've done a few morning sessions and you guys are all here like at 7 a.m.
We are going before 7 a.m.
I'm coming in at like 8. I'm just like, oh my gosh, how do you do this?
Yeah.
So to do all that, to take on all that energy, but to also be doing, and you do this full time, but then to go and do everything you do outside of this full time, I'm just like, wow, you are an extremely hard worker and constantly inspired. And it takes a special type of person to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm relying on the resources within. I kid you not. There are unlimited supplies. There is unlimited energy. There is unlimited resources and ideas and creative solutions. And even I have experienced resources, of course. I have experienced people coming up and giving me encouragement and support and, the right things at the right time. But I've also experienced time being stretched in my favor. Even this morning, I wanted to go running, but I didn't think I had time to. And I woke up and I'm like, oh, I have time to go running this morning. So I was, I mean, it really, when you know, not just believe, but when you know that all things are possible and that everything is working out in your favor, then I mean, anything is possible. And working a 40-hour work week and trying to write and create podcasts and all of that stuff, it's definitely possible because it's my purpose. So, and maybe part of me working so much will give other people belief that they can do it too. So
I believe I brought up this. I haven't even read it yet. You know what I realized? I bought this book and I realized I don't even think I need to read it because just buying it reminds me of the concept. I forget his name, but he was a writer who worked for the Postal Service for his whole life, his whole career. But he was also like a best-selling writer of books. I don't know if it was novels or what type of books he wrote. Every morning from 5 to 8 a.m., something along those lines, he wrote. Every single day before work. Focused work, though. Just focused in. All right, I only have this much time. He did that consistently over time, had a family life, worked a career, so he never had to worry about paying rent or any of that, like a lot of struggling artists. And he was just as successful as a lot of people who give up everything to go right. So it really was a good perspective of like, there is no excuse.
Yeah.
And something I've been tackling lately, no one's coming to save you either. Like, you have to be the one to take the helm and start steering that ship or taking that train and putting it on the right track. Like, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And if you wait, you're going to end up going directions that other people want you to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So the Holy Shift, my podcast.
Yep. As we shift.
is what you just said. You have to be the one that steers the ship and takes the helm and all of that. But the Holy Shift is realizing that you don't have to do it alone, that there is more to you and there is more for you. And when you align with that, then there's more that can come through you. And so in every life situation, you do have this personal power within you. You have this inner guidance system that is guiding you, but also providing for you. And so the Holy Shift is taking life situations that we all encounter. Life happens. And then, feeling it, going, oh my gosh, oh crap, I can't believe this is happening and all this stuff. And experiencing that, feeling that genuinely. But then taking a moment to realize that there is more within you, more available to you, and aligning with that. And then just saying, okay, I'm okay in this moment, and I'm just going to, wait and see what I need to do next. And when you do that, then things line up, miracles happen, you get signs of confirmation. One example, I'm going to talk about many examples of things, but my mom a year ago fell, broke her leg. She was 89 at the time. And my life turned on a dime because I suddenly had to be with her or find someone to be with her around the clock because she's got a little dementia going. She's confused. She was not supposed to put any weight on her leg, and she kept forgetting. And she would get up and she kept falling out of bed. And so we had to come up with a solution. And I remembered being on her couch at 2 a.m. I was still needing to come into work, be here by 7, work till, 6 and get home by 7. The next day, and I was on her couch with one eye open, watching her, making sure that she wasn't getting up out of bed. And I was just going, okay, how am I going to do this? What do I need to do next? And, I was trying to sleep, but then in the morning I thought, call the senior center. And we called the senior center and found a caregiver. And she was amazing and the perfect fit. So these kind of things happen all of the time when, we do no one's going to save you. We do have to steer the ship and, and do it all ourselves, but we don't have to do it by ourselves. We have more resources available to us and within us. So that's the Holy Shift.
You can see how the inner GPS and the Holy Shift, it's all connected.
It is.
It's all...
Yeah.
You have to have that inner GPS going to have those holy shifts.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's beautiful. I often, one of the things that my mind has told me in the past is, my friends are retiring. Why am I lifting this whole thing off the ground right now at the ripe old age of 58? But I do see that me being able to look back over the decades and see how things do work out, I think I have more belief for people to borrow. And I think that they can gain from that. And that's why I'm called to do this right now.
What all do you, you want to do you're going to do a podcast with it. So you kind of break it down of what your plan is.
So I have, the first book that I wrote during COVID is called You Already Know. I'm just waiting to get a publisher or possibly self-publish it. But it talks about how you already know all the answers to the questions in life. You just need to learn how to dial in, move from your head to your heart and follow that. And so from that, I just thought it would be helpful to talk about life situations and how to do that. And that's why I came up with the Holy Shift. And because, shift happens in life. And I always like kind of a fun spin on things. And one of the things is, what's the F in shift? What's the F in shift? But what is the F in shift? And that is, having faith that everything is working out in your favor, and then being able to go from fear to maybe acceptance, and then maybe from acceptance to ease. And then when you hit ease and peace, that's when you're, just the channel of the flow of provision and everything is starting to ramp up, and you can really see the next step clearly. You can, the doors of opportunity open and the solutions come when you are in that space. So that's what I just want to help us all learn how to take life, experience life, but realize that you can shift into a higher gear.
That's going to make a great t-shirt, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Shift happens,
yes, yeah, it's deep shift.
So we're talking some deep shift here today.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, just learning that about you, and just learning about your own journey, and knowing and seeing you work. I mean, it's inspirational. It lets me like, dude, what's your excuse? When I look at me, I'm like, hey, there is no excuse. Like, but it seems like you're tapped into that vibration. You're tapped into, when you do tap into that vibration and make that shift and following your inner GPS, God's not going to put you in any situation that you're not supposed to be in.
Correct. Yeah.
So I think many of us, myself included at times, like, well, why do I have to do this? Why?
Yeah.
And it's like, there's been a couple of times as of late, I'm like, why do I have to do this? It's like, don't question it. Like, go do it.
Yeah.
And
even if, we are in a situation, life does happen, we are human and we get in our own way sometimes, and, things happen. But I know even if things happen, God can work together everything for good. Even if those situations arise that are challenging, difficult, either self-imposed or imposed on by other people, reckless people that are in a state of not listening to their own inner GPS. So, yeah. But we can learn in every situation and make it good.
And that's really what I've been doing lately, is whenever I do feel that pinch of like, oh, it's like, okay, what's the lesson? What's the new skill you're getting? How can you use this? Like, everything can be used to your advantage. That's one thing I'm realizing too. It's like, sometimes we're given gold, but we don't realize it's gold. Like just receive, just be open to receive. And that's something I really had to learn too, especially with the injury. I was I still am, I guess, but prideful person. And I was in a position where I needed help, but I didn't. Yeah. I can do it on my own. But then when an injury like this, it was like, no, you can't.
Yeah. It is.
You need help, and you need a lot of it.
Yeah. It's hard to ask for help. Yeah. And it's, because I never want to impose on anybody. And, it's less that I want to be independent. It's more that I don't want to impose on anybody, Yeah, so it is hard to ask for help. And sometimes, not in my case, but sometimes I think asking for help implies that you're not strong enough or not capable enough, and that creates its own ball of wax. But anyway.
Yeah. So, and have you always been this way? Like, have you always had these ideas?
When was
the shift?
I've always been creative. I mean, when I remember being a young girl and writing a story and showing my mom and saying, "Mom, I want this to go in Reader's Digest," and she was like, "What? What?" She didn't have the same vision that I had. I've always, and then when I was in high school, I, would sit at the piano and write songs. And when I was on maternity leave, I wrote 2 screenplays. I don't know. I've always been creative and things. And I've always been a deep thinker, ponderer, And many people would say, "Oh, you're thinking too much." And I used to feel like I was weird or crazy or something like that. And then I've realized that I am exactly how I need to be. And it's okay if other people don't see that, So.
How much, I mean, if you don't mind discussing, how much has, your own spiritual path played into your experience? Whether, I know you and I talk a lot, God or the universe, or would you mind talking about that a little bit, like your perspective?
Yeah, I, was born in the church. My dad was a pastor, had his doctorate in theology from USC, and my grandpa was a pastor. And actually, my eighth great grandpa baptized George Washington. So, I have
Like the George
the
Washington.
George Washington. They have paintings of it in the Potomac River or whatever. Anyway, but so I have a long line of religious leaders in my lineage, and but my dad definitely came from a perspective of all inclusive, that love comes in many forms. I remember one of my high school friends, she definitely was not religious, and she was talking about the Big Bang Theory, and my dad was there, and she's like, Mr. Reeves, what do you think about the Big Bang Theory, and blah blah blah, and he just started to elaborate on, well, who's to say that what was one day in biblical sense, that the Big Bang Theory couldn't have happened according to the biblical story as well. And so he was just very open and things. And then my grandpa, I remembered at Thanksgiving and Christmas, whenever we would get together and he would pray, it's like his whole being changed when he was in prayer. And you could just feel the reverence for God that my grandpa had. And so I think I just felt that there was something real going on here. And growing up with my dad's perspective, I had the freedom to not just learn about religion, but to actually experience spirituality. And I did have moments. Oh, and then John Wooden went to my dad's church, and the UCLA basketball coach who won numerous NCAA titles and everything. And so I just knew him as John and Nell Wooden, and our birthdays were within a week of each other. So we always had cake together in the fellowship hall the week of our birthdays. But when I was about 7 or 8, in my dad's church services, they had a children's moment where my dad usually, or somebody else would come and tell the kids a story. So we would climb up on the steps of the church up at the front, and someone would tell us a story. And this one particular day, John Wooden was the one that was going to talk to us. And he gave us all a little silver cross that said, Jesus Christ is Lord. And I still have that cross to this day. And he said that he kept it in his pocket at all times to remind him that he was not alone, that Jesus was with him. And that was on a Sunday. And then the next day was Monday. Obviously, I went to school and I took that cross and I put it in my pocket. And I remembered being out on the playground, 7 years old, and I took the cross out and it said, Jesus Christ is Lord. And I remembered, oh, Jesus is with me even on the playground. And I just felt his presence there, and then, then just kind of went on with life. I don't really recall any big moments after that until I was in high school. And I had another moment where, in high school, you're thinking so much about what other people think about you. It's all you got to be cool. So you're just kind of trying to fit in and not trying to be awkward. And our youth group met on Wednesday nights at Malibu Presbyterian Church. And I remember being in the youth room, and Jim Kermeth was our leader, and he was giving a message that day about how it just doesn't matter what people think of you, because God loves you no matter what. And he was talking about the Bill Murray movie, I think it was Meatballs or something, where he was a counselor at the camp. It might be another movie, but he was a counselor of these misfits, and they were at a camp across the lake from the camp that had all the cool kids. And the night before the big competition of camp versus camp, he was giving this speech, and it concluded with him just going around the room going, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And he got the whole everyone riled up and stuff. And that's how we ended our youth group that night, was it just doesn't matter what other people think. because God loves us no matter what. And I went that day changed because the next day I went to school and I was talking with whoever I wanted to talk to. You know how like when you're in high school and you're like, oh, I want to talk to them, but they're not in the popular kids, so I can't, you know? And the next day I was just like, who cares? And I was just talking to everybody and had a great time. And people noticed. They were coming up to me and saying, something's changed in you, you know? And I was like, yeah, you know, God loves me, so who cares what people think? And it was just such a freeing time. So those were some, you know, some moments when I just felt the presence and acceptance and love of God that was real, you know. And it's just kind of, you know, and there's been times when I wasn't, you know, spiritually as astute as I am now and things, but yeah.
Well, and first off, I remember when you mentioned like you knew John Wooden and all that, you're like, I'm like, wait, like the John Wooden, like UCLA coach John, you're like, yeah, oh yeah, no, I'm real good, you know, just like the king of
I know
coaching and coaching philosophy. I'm like that's amazing. That's an amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And as you were talking, you remind me, it's like we've talked about so many things. Even going into this, I'm like, we just got to just let it flow because there's just too many things to try to. But a lot of our early talks, I remember, because like throughout my healing journey, I was kind of headed this way anyway, but I felt like the injury, like, all right, there's no more excuse. Now you need to sit down and read the New Testament. Like, I had grown up in the church, and then, you know, my parents told my brother and I, like, well, when you're 18, it's up to you if you want to go. Well, what did we do? We just quit going. And I moved west and exploring all these different spiritual paths and this, that, and the other. But like, I feel like Jesus was calling me in some way, like not to quote unquote follow the Christian religion by any means, but just like, no, see what this guy has to say. Because I heard it all when I was younger, but I wasn't listening. Like to me, it was almost like, I don't want to call it fairy tales, but they did it in a way where you're not really listening to the message as much, I guess. I don't know if that or I just maybe wasn't ready to hear it. But then when I really, because I had boxed everything into one, I threw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm like, oh, well, religion is this, and the church is man, and man is evil, and they just want money, and this, that, and the other. But then when I really started looking into what Jesus is saying, like in the New Testament, and the more I start reading, I'm like, oh yeah, like this guy actually knows a lot of what he's talking about. And just that message alone, and realizing that, I think just through, and I may be heading into a way different realm here, but it's just that opening up to just hearing the message of him instead of me just attaching everything, religion bad, throwing everything out type of thing. And I remember a lot of our early talks had to do with that.
With religion and
with
things.
religion, and but then just Jesus in particular. And I mentioned this, talked about it with Eric on the last podcast, the Jesus of Nazareth series from the 70s with Robert Powell, which is just phenomenal. Like really watching that and just really that bringing me back, and like even you inviting me to the church where you and Tim are at, and like getting back in that environment, and Laura and I coming, like I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me of, again, having no puns intended here, but a holy shift, like switching your framework and letting go of certain ideologies that I may have had. Yeah.
Well, religion is an interesting thing. I respect religion and I value it because I do believe that for all religions, you know, there are different denominations even within Christianity and you know, all different religions, I think, started with a sincere intention to seek God, or, you know, whatever that higher power is that different religions call it. And so I respect religion, but I understand that as, you know, I mentioned too before about the human body, that, you know, each person is unique and stuff. Each set of people that started the religion or the denomination within the religion is unique and have values and perspectives that are that make sense to them. And so I see religion as a way for people to get introduced to and seek God, but I don't think that there is any one religion that meets everybody's needs, because we are all different and unique. And so within religion, it's usually when people don't have a good experience or something, it's not that that religion isn't for them, but it's just maybe that denomination isn't, because it's not meeting their needs. And a lot of us were given or imposed upon other people's perspective of religion, and sometimes certain denominations have kind of a fear of, like, if you don't do this set of A, B, and C, then you're not going to earn a place in heaven, type of thing. And that is conditional love, and that's not what I've experienced with the real God that I love to live with. And so I'm respectful of people's belief systems, but at the same time, I do see that having a spiritual practice of one's own is how God can work even greater than if someone thinks that following A, B, and C rules is the only way to get a place in heaven. And I'm very careful about talking about this, because I am respectful of people's beliefs and where they are, because I know that we are all uniquely created, but we also are on a spiritual path. And kind of like our developmental states of, someone in kindergarten can't grasp things that someone in college grasping calculus can understand. All of us are also on a spiritual developmental journey as well, and I respect that in people too. So, when you read the red letters, what Jesus spoke in the New Testament, there is definite truth there, because in my perspective, that's the Holy Spirit within him speaking. And one of my books is called The Red Letters.
Oh, wow.
And I'm gonna talk about that because there are many different parts of the Bible, and the New Testament especially, speaks to me, and specifically the red letters that Jesus spoke in the New Testament.
Well, mark me down for one of those.
Okay.
When that's available. And,
Okay.
I could talk this topic with you for 3 more hours.
I know.
I really like what you said there, though, because I related to what you just said. Like, some people need to hear messages in different ways. And I don't think it's meant maliciously from people. It's just they're doing what the people taught them, who taught them, who taught them. They're like, hey, this is this. Believe this or this happens. Mm-hmm. That's just always rubbed me the wrong way. Mm-hmm. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like, what about my friend so-and-so from India over here? I remember specifically being told that we need to go save him because he's headed to hell. Like, and he's his family were the nicest people in the world. They're very nice. And I just never, to come at someone like that and just say, hey, you're going there. I just want to let you know you need to do this or this happens. That just really just turned me off to everything. But like realizing that, finding my own path, I guess, in that, and finding my ways to God, then it all starts to connect. Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, that's it. Mm-hmm. That's it. But I don't have to put down any other religion or any other structure, because maybe for certain people in that sect, that works for them.
Yeah.
But you have to give people the opportunity for that to work for them, because that may not work for them. This might work for them over here. Mm-hmm. So I thought you beautifully crafted a very complex, sensitive issue.
Yeah, well, I just want to be respectful of all. And I know that I don't know everything, and I don't know what's going on within each person, but I do trust that God does. And so, if I'm in a certain situation, I don't want to judge people like other people might be judging me. And I also don't want to, I try to be open to where other people are in their spiritual journey. And
Debbie, this has been a gift.
Yay.
And again, we'll have to do part 2, 3, 4
Yes.
down the road. But before we leave, where can people find you? Any other projects you have going on? Anything we need to look out for?
Yeah. Well,
from the Holy Shift and everything you got going on.
Yeah. Well, I have the Holy Shift podcast, and it's the Holy Shift podcast on Instagram, but then also on YouTube. You could go to youtube.com/Debbie Reeves. And because I'm repurposing what I had it titled as previously. So it is going to come out as the Holy Shift soon. Or you can go to my website, debbiereeves.org, and sign up for my email list. And I would love to talk with whoever wants to listen. So
awesome. I'm sure you'll be updating people as books come out. And so the email list is probably one of the best ways to stay connected.
Yeah, for sure. Because I am going to be doing all kinds of great things in the upcoming year.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And before I give you the last word, I've told you before, I'll tell you again, thank you.
Oh.
Like I do believe in angels. And Eric, who you've met and he was an angel, and then you, angel.
Thank you.
Brought me through this, and I'm just eternally grateful for you. You have such a gift, such insight, such a great passion to share with the world. Mm-hmm. And you've helped so many people. And I'm just really grateful to know you. I mean, I could go on, but that's really just thank you from the bottom of my heart, everything you've done for me. And I always try to give the guests the last word. Is there anything you want to leave us on? And it can be anything.
Yeah. Well, first, it is an honor to know you and an honor to be a part of your journey back to the new Sam 2.0.
2.0.
But I just hope that if anyone takes something away from this, is that there is more to you, there is more for you, and just to try to move from your head down into your heart and try to find that. Yeah.
I think that's perfect. Well, Debbie, thank you so much. And until next time, I believe I'm scheduled for therapy next week.
Yes, we will see you then.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Sam Dever podcast. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you watch the podcast, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@the Sam Dever podcast.